Hello, listeners. Mallory Wilsey here, Chief Producer of the Enrollify Network, and I want to take just a quick moment to tell you about another show on our podcast network designed specifically for all the education technology enthusiasts out there. The Higher Ed Geek podcast is a deep dive into the world of educational technology and its transformative impact on the student experience. Geek out each week with host Dustin Ramsdell. His conversations are a mix of engaging storytelling, expert analysis, and a genuine passion for all things higher ed and tech. Whether you're an educator or an administrator or just someone passionate about the intersection of technology and education, this podcast promises to deliver content that's both enlightening and entertaining. You can subscribe to the show by visiting podcast.enrollify.org or by searching the Higher Ed Geek wherever you get your podcasts.
First of all, we do see a giant increase in computer information sciences. And I mentioned going back to the 90s, it would be an interesting thing to look at. But even in that 12 years, increased almost 250%. So continuing to grow. Natural resources, engineering, mathematics, health. These are all things that we were talking about off there. This is STEM. Like you were kind of brought up in the emerging STEM push. And it seems like that is, we're seeing the results of that in these degree programs that are growing so much.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going through high school when that I guess was kind of originating, the messaging around how to get to college, what to study in college, what your sort of career trajectory was supposed to look like really took shape while I was still in high school. So we had a lot of college preparedness courses. We had a lot of messaging about STEM degrees, about a lot of programming in high school about those topics as well. So a lot of emphasis on those like more practical, career-oriented, hands-on sort of degree types, as opposed to more liberal arts type programming.
Welcome to the EduData Podcast, a podcast that serves as your weekly guide to the data driving higher education. We are your hosts. I'm Jamie Boggs.
And I'm Timothy Davis. Join us every Friday for weekly breakdowns of the most important data, trends, and topics in higher education.
The EduData Podcast is a part of the Enrollify Network, a robust collection of podcasts designed to help higher education professionals like you grow. Explore our other shows at enrollify.org or check out some of my personal favorites linked in the show notes below.
Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the leading AI-powered, all-in-one student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.
Welcome back to the EduData Podcast. I am Jamie Boggs here with Timothy Davis. Timothy, what's up, man?
You're bringing the energy today. Yeah, we just got back from the Engage Summit, and I'm tired, I'm rested up, but that energy is definitely carrying me.
Yeah, it's certainly a balance of recovery and being highly motivated but super tired. So I'm hitting the tipping point of where I can actually act on the motivation, I think.
Absolutely. Well, if we saw you at the Engage Summit, it was a pleasure. We enjoyed lots of great conversations with Element 451 users, as well as some folks that were just there to check it out and see what was going on. So if we saw you there, thanks for coming, and thanks for tuning back in and listening to another episode.
We got to meet a lot of other Enrollify creators at the Engage Summit for the first time in person. Had some awesome conversations about collaboration and what they're doing. So it was good stuff.
For sure. Yeah, if you've spent your career on campus, like that was kind of my perception coming in to a remote environment, which is what Element 451 and Enrollify are. And it's kind of interesting, like you only get to see the people you work with in person once a year. You know, sometimes you've never met in person, and so it's always a fun time to get together and hang out with these people that you spend every day with, but not in person.
I feel like you know everything about them except how tall they are. That's always the big shock for me.
That is a shocker for sure. Yeah, we you can kind of like play a game like guessing how tall everybody is or whatever.
I am always wrong every single time.
Me too. I'm terrible judge of that.
EduData does not include height specific metrics.
Yeah, we haven't recorded height data on all Element 451 employees and Enrollify creators.
That would be just a fun company game for any remote company to do, of guess everybody's height and then, I don't know, just see how good you are at it, because I am terrible. We have gotten back into our everyday lives and found some interesting data to talk to our listeners about, specifically from Higher Ed Data Stories. Jon Boeckenstedt is authors lots of, I guess, created content, not only in the data, but also explains some of the data, gives some commentary. But there was a recent post over there earlier this month that caught my eye, actually early last month by the time this comes out, about changes in bachelor's degrees over time, bachelor's degrees that are earned over time from 2010 to 2022. Now, of course, this is going to have a factor of the pandemic in it, but also just the change in, I don't know, we listen to conversations from the partners we work with at Element 451 all the time of, we're driving people to these majors, to these programs. We're really trying to grow this department. And this data kind of shows where things are actually going. And I was surprised by some of the results, but not surprised by others. I guess to start off, Timothy, the data set here is primarily just what majors are received through what degrees are attached to certain majors, and then overall how many degrees are being earned by sector, by region, by Carnegie type, by urban ethnicity, of other demographics of the institutions.
Yeah, so this is, again, coming from highereddatastories.com. Jon Boeckenstedt out of Oregon State. And basically what he does is he goes and grabs iPad's data. That's all publicly available data from the Department of Education. You go download their spreadsheets, and then he does a little bit of work to join them up year over year. And then he brings that joined data set into some Tableau visualizations, which is really cool. And then the way that he's kind of identifying majors or degree types is through the CIP code, which is what iPads identifies for each like major than an institution that reports to the federal government and receives financial aid. Every major and degree that they report on gets rolled up into one of those CIP codes, and so that's kind of what we're tracking this year over year. But yeah, you had a couple of takeaways there, Jamie. You want to launch us into those?
Yeah, overall degrees are up. In that 12-year span, more majors, more degrees are being earned at a clip of 29.1%. I know we often talk, we heard quite a bit of conversation about the upcoming population cliff and what that's going to mean for us in higher education, but that's almost a third. That's a lot more than I expected during that time frame. If you went from back to 1990, I would have said, yeah, that makes sense. But in that 12-year time frame, 29% more degrees being earned was it stuck out to me as much more than I expected. I expected it to be around 10.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, I think that's a positive sign. Like the industry is healthy. We're still continuing to award degrees, and people are persisting on through their programs. But a couple of important things have happened in there. The shift in online education has taken place across this time frame. The shift in continuing education for folks returning for more advanced degrees or returning for certificates, and then on certificates as well, a repackaging of some degree programs to make them more accessible. So a lot of trends have happened in the industry to keep degree awarding high and continuing to grow.
And to increase accessibility in some ways. I know a lot of states are doing free community college for in-state residents and those kinds of things. So increasing accessibility to a lot of these degrees. And the first thing I looked at here, being completely honest, and Jon kind of starts off the article with this. He says there's been a lot written about the death of the English degree. Is it true? So we have a breakdown, and it's broken down by first and second majors. So if people get 2 degrees, obviously one's the primary and one's the secondary. So in looking at it that way, I think we learn a lot here. First of all, we do see a giant increase in computer information sciences. And I mentioned going back to the 90s, it would be an interesting thing to look at. But even in that 12 years, increased almost 250%. So continuing to grow. Natural resources, engineering, mathematics, health. these are all things that we were talking about off there. This is STEM. Like you were kind of brought up in the emerging STEM push, and it seems like that is we're seeing the results of that in these degree programs that are growing so much.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going through high school when that I guess was kind of originating the messaging around how to get to college, what to study in college, what your sort of career trajectory was supposed to look like, really took shape while I was still in high school. So we had a lot of college preparedness courses. We had a lot of messaging about STEM degrees, a lot of programming in high school about those topics as well. So a lot of emphasis on those like more practical, career-oriented, hands-on sort of degree types, as opposed to more liberal arts type programming. Of course, we still had English. Of course, we still had history. Political science had all of that. But when it came time to talk about college, we heard a lot about STEM.
Yeah, and you look on the opposite side of that, there's a clear kind of breaking point of degrees that were earned at a lower rate. And I'm just going to rattle most of those off. I'll come back to one, but a decrease in 4% for family and consumer sciences. Social sciences are down. Philosophy and religion, education, liberal studies, ethnic studies, theology and religious studies, foreign language, literature, English, and history. English down almost 37% and history down over 38%. Now, the only one that is negative in there that I think doesn't fit is architecture. And maybe in my mind, I just know so little about architecture that I really combine that with engineering. So maybe there's just been a change in focus what those degrees are.
That's a good question. I don't know what that change looks like either. Yeah, maybe architecture is more on the artistic side, right? How to express various ideas through spaces and buildings that we construct, as opposed to like engineering, which is more like hands-on steel beams and concrete.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's there's got to be something there, but the rest of those do fall into that liberal arts category. I went to a liberal arts institution, and I think I am all the better for it. I am a very well-rounded individual compared to what I would have been otherwise. I'm not saying I do a lot of things well, but I would have been pretty bad off had I not gone to a liberal arts school. However, we also see employers saying, we want people who are well-rounded. We want people who are well-read, with people skills, with communication skills. So we're seeing employers say, we want well-rounded people. At the same time, we're seeing those as primary majors being diminished. When we look at secondary majors, it's a bit different. People are starting to, for example, as a second degree, theology and religious studies are up 33%. Visual and performing arts up 17%. Social sciences up 15%. So it seems like we've shifted from those being a primary focus for a lot of students, and students who really want to study that, they're going to go ahead and get a degree in a STEM field or a professional field, but they're also going to study something more along the artistic lines to go along with it, which is great. I think that makes people more well-rounded as well, but I think they're not going away. English is not dying, but it is shifting in the way that it's prioritized in studies, I think.
Absolutely. And I think that this is a good place to mention kind of some of the other thoughts that we've heard from around the Enrollify podcast network. I'm thinking of the Higher Ed Pulse. Seth and Mallory had an episode about liberal arts a while back that you can go find. But basically Seth's takeaway, which I really appreciated, was like liberal arts doesn't necessarily have a content problem, because obviously that content is still really relevant and enjoyed by lots of folks. People are interested in those areas and enjoy exploring those areas of humanity, right? And that's why we call it the humanities. But Seth's take was that liberal arts has a marketing problem, that it's not packaged correctly, that it's a bad fit for what people are sort of trying to buy. And I generally agree with that. I think that that's a good take, and that the content is there and people are interested in it. People want it, both employers and students, but it's not coming through in the right format. And as people become more career focused, as the economy and the labor market shift, people want degrees that they feel more confident in getting and advancing their careers with, rather than and so there's kind of a choice that has to be made there by the student.
And just like any other consumer-based industry, there's some degree here of kind of a self-feeding cycle. We see people getting more tech degrees, so the institution says we need more people to get these tech degrees because they are at other schools. So we market the more STEM based degrees, and then more people come for that, and then we need to market it more. So we kind of get in a cycle there where we're perpetuating the culture of moving in that direction. And I think you're right. I think we need to revisit the messaging and the value in studying those other fields. I mentioned it before when I was an advisor back in the day. I used to tell people, look, just study something you enjoy. You'll figure the career stuff will fall if you're following what you enjoy. And I know you and I have covered some data sets that suggest I was off, but I still kind of think there's value in that, whether the humanitarian piece that you mentioned earlier, or the just humanity as you referenced, or if it's a matter of people studying what they like so they're good at it, and then when they go out into the world, they're good at what they do instead of forcing themselves to a career that they're not passionate about.
Yeah, the system itself is very complex. There's a lot of inputs, and then there's reaction to other inputs, where one set of variables responds to what another set of variables does. So the job market responds to what students are maybe studying, or maybe inversely, students respond to what the job market is demanding, and then schools market programs because they see other schools marketing those programs. Yeah, so it's a very complex system. It's very interesting. But I think we could talk here about what digging deeper into this data might look like. I don't think we have the time on this podcast to really do this level of research, but I think it'd be interesting for us and for our listeners to kind of brainstorm what digging further into this data to try to understand the driving forces behind it, what that might look like. So I have a little list here of different data sources and questions that we might ask to try to better understand what is driving the shift in type of degree awarded. Allow me to pose some of those to you, Jamie, and I'd be interested to hear your thoughts. The first thing that we could look at, which we've already kind of alluded to, is employment and salary data. Where are salaries shifting? Are various degree types or various job positions and titles and focus areas increasing or decreasing in their salary ranges? That's something that we might be able to find from like the Bureau of Labor Statistics here in the United States. We also might be able to find it from like the National Association of Colleges and Employers, so NACE. So a couple of different places that might give us that survey data, or give us that like census data, where we could find that information about what salaries and employment types have shifted. The other one that we could look at is potentially student debt and financial aid. We could look at the amount of debt incurred, or the amount of financial aid requested by various degree types. Right, try to understand if folks are accruing more debt based on the program that they're going into. We kind of did that in a prior episode. We saw a study that did that in a prior episode that was looking at ROI and trying to provide a definition of ROI based on kind of a mixed data set. We also could look at enrollment trends. So that's like what students are actually choosing. I don't think that would necessarily be the causal driver. I think that students are probably responding to other inputs rather than driving like what degrees they actually want, while some certainly are like pursuing what they're genuinely interested in. I think most students are trying to respond to what they perceive is happening in the job market and the economy. So there again could be our fourth input is we could look at job market data. We could look that maybe again come from the Bureau of Labor and Statistics, for like projections for job growth. We could look at that as a potential input and driver for these changes. We could also look at like institutional changes. While institutions are also sort of responsive to other market forces, they might be in some ways sort of driving by the programs that they choose to fund, the degrees they choose to offer, where they sort of pivot, and so we could maybe look at some of their spending. High school curriculum changes, another one that we could look at, and that's kind of what I shared in my experience, was like a shift in the programming and the degree that was sort of taught to me in high school. We could also look at like public perception and media coverage. So like looking maybe at survey data to say like, what are people thinking about liberal arts? What are people saying about liberal arts? What is the media reporting about liberal arts? The real driver that I think that we could really dig into, or one that I think is a major driver here, is government policy and funding. I think it'd be interesting to look at like Department of Education data or maybe like state level data to show the amount of public funding or the restrictions on certain types of funding for certain types of programs, certain types of institutions that states have enacted, to see if that is also sort of driving this change towards more like STEM related degrees. So of all that I mentioned, I apologize, it was like 9 in there. Did any of those particular data sources jump out to you? And if so, like, what do you think we would find in there if we were to sort of merge those data sets and try to understand the drivers behind degree award type?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think employment data being combined with this, and we mentioned a few weeks ago the difference between income and wealth. Wealth is usually generational, more pertains to what you go into, or how successful you will potentially be going into school. But I think the income data based on these degrees, the wealth, and again, the projections would all be great. I would also love to see some incoming data of what did students intend to study, and did that change once they got to college? So did this many people come in wanting to study computer information science, or did they come in wanting to be writers, wanting to be authors, and then moved into a direction for more financial opportunity? I'm not sure about that. And then the high school piece would be or not even high school. It goes into, I have kids in elementary school who have STEAM classes now. They've added an art component back into STEM. Is that when their cohorts get ready to go to college, is that going to impact it? So we're seeing some curriculum changes in recent years. How is that going to project forward? So I think the income and then the pre-college preparation and messaging, I think, are the two biggest pieces for me that could really tell us how these decisions and why these decisions are being made. But yeah, I think all those things would be helpful. Like you said, we don't have time to do that. If any of our listeners have time to do that, we would love to have you on to talk about your results.
Yeah, that'd be fun, kind of an open source project or something like that. So, but yeah, this would be something interesting to compare against maybe your institution's data if you have downloaded in the past some of these not open source, but publicly available data sets from various government or state or federal entities. Yeah, that'd be really interesting. And we'd also love to know your thoughts on this topic. If you've seen any other data that's kind of compelling that helps us understand the drivers behind major shifts, or helps us kind of understand how majors have shifted and what that means for students, what that means for career outcomes. We'd love to hear from you. So please reach out on LinkedIn or in our show notes here. You can find some contact information for us. Reach out. Let us know what you think of the show. Let us know what you think of the topics. For this one, we'll go ahead and wrap it up. Thank you for listening in. I'm Timothy Davis, and for Jamie Boggs, this has been the EduData Podcast. We'll see you in the next one.
The EduData Podcast is part of the Enrollify Podcast Network. If you like this podcast, chances are you'll like the other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing by the month. We've got a plethora of marketing, enrollment, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks, all designed to empower you to be a better higher ed professional.
Our shows help higher ed marketers and admissions professionals find their next big idea and feature a selection of the industry's best as your hosts. Learn from Jamie Hunt, Artis Cadu, Dustin Ramsdale, Jeremy Tiers, and so many of your other favorite leaders in higher ed. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the leading AI-powered all-in-one student engagement platform helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.